Today, we're looking at Private Reserve's Fiesta Red. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Private Reserve's Fiesta Red is a red ink, and to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen per day. I then put it into a Lamy All-Star with a 1.1 stub to take my notes for this video. Before we go to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done, and what we see is when I put the line down, there's a little bit of a darker pink on the bottom, a pink pushes up, and then we start getting some of the lighter reds. Now, we also get a little bit of yellow across the top, which is very nice, and you see I marked it with a line where the water stopped, so the water pushed well past this ink. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That red line across the bottom, much darker, much more resistant. This gives me an idea of what's going to happen when we do hit the resistance tests. The dark red does not really push up except on the farthest right edge of this chromatography. It's basically pink pushing its way up. Then the yellow, and water still travels farther than the ink itself. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. Now I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it did very well. The top of the second H, we see that it started to bloom out and feather quite a bit. However, on a majority, I feel that the highlighter is doing perfectly good and that this is a safe ink to use in a highlighting situation. Water surprisingly did very little. It did reactivate some and pull some of the darker red off, but a majority of it is left behind. I don't think water will be enough to get this out of your pen. Pen Flush did everything water did and then some. You see that all that's really there is some pinks and very light reds left behind. Now this is only 30 seconds of the Pen Flush solution being there, so I really do think Pen Flush is all that's going to be necessary to get this out of your pen. Bleach is completely destroying it, but it leaves behind this kind of orangey stain on the paper, so there is something fighting the bleach, even though I only gave it 30 seconds. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Private Reserve's Fiesta Red has a viscosity of 2.01, which makes it a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with extra fine and medium nibs on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Now this ink was a faster ink, a wetter ink, but its dry time is 14 seconds, which makes it very normal, and we've seen that quite a bit. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing sample consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. It has a very loose nib at this point because I've done way more writing samples than what I've posted videos at this point. Clairefontaine, let's take a look. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Great shading all the way through this ink. This is a very well shading red. Nice. Extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Shading all the way through. Tons of it. You see very gradual shading and you see very abrupt shading. Nice combination, of unexpected combination. 9 seconds to dry. The medium has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does shade throughout quite a bit. 16 seconds to dry. The scrubbies show us to expect color variation. We got tons of it. The smear test, you could likely recover it. Tomoe River. No bleed. We get ghosting. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We lost the shading. It's not there. It's always where I'm now. I like shade more than anything else in ink. I think it's great to see. It's
one of the things that makes me test inks over and over again, to find those ones that shade fantastic. And this paper's just my enemy for that. It doesn't do well. It's a nice paper. It performs great. I understand why so many people like it. I just don't. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 16 seconds to dry. It ate up the shading of this ink. And we're going to see that later on. This ate up the shading. The medium had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade, and took 22 seconds to dry. It just made it a boring red ink here. The scrubby showed us no color variation. We got no color variation. The smear test says you don't get to recover it. So we go to rhodia paper, which sometimes makes us lose the shading, that coating. Sometimes, not all the time. That's a crapshoot, so you got to test that stuff. Now, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, plenty of shading. Nice shading all over, very gradual shading. In a couple spots it gets really abrupt. Nice, very nice stuff. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, shading all over it. Really nice shading all over it. Look at what goes on with the K in Quick. Brown starts a little darker and then gets a little dark or a little lighter right here. Fox starts darker, gets lighter, gets darker again. Fantastic stuff. Lazy starts really dark, gets really light at the Y, or at the Z, gets dark again at the Y. It's nice. It's nice. I think correcting papers, if kids were using really nice paper, they wouldn't mind seeing the corrections all over the place. You'd be marking something off and giving them comments about stuff, and they're like, but yeah, look at that shading. I don't mind that he wrote all over my paper because it looks fantastic. 7 seconds to dry. Let's just go ahead and get that to get schools to get nicer paper to kids, so we can use really nice inks and make them feel good about corrections. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, shading all over. Really nice shading. It goes from dark to much darker on this because it's a darker tone that we're getting right here. So we get the dark to much darker. So we got the much darker on the LA, just dark on the Z, little lighter spots on the Y. Nice. Very pleasant to look at. The brown starts much darker, gets lighter, gets, the O is way lighter than that B. It's stunning to look at. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine and the medium show us that we're going to get color variation, and we did. Smear test says you could likely recover it, and I believe them. Now the paper that I'm going to keep just butchering, Monokaki. Monokaki, because I don't know how to pronounce it. Monokaki. It's funny because the little kid in me wants to make jokes all the time. We get no bleeding. We get ghosting. It's a thinner paper. It's lighter in tone. That's not really bleeding that's coming through. That's schmutz from my being lazy and putting it onto a paper that wasn't completely dry. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does show us shading. Nice shading throughout. The R goes from very light and it gradually comes into darker. It gets lighter again into the E, and it's beautiful. And it does that a lot all over all of the 1.1 writing. Fantastic stuff. Extra fine, same tone, same behaviors. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. That same lovely gradual shading all over it. 6 seconds to dry. Now the medium gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Same exact lovely shading. Very gradual. That color shading where you go from the white to black and you see it change through all the grays without seeing it change gray tone. That's what's happening to this red here. 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows us we're going to get some color variation, and we did. Smear test says you could likely recover it. So we look at Tumway River, which gives no bleeding. Minor ghosting. It looks way worse on camera. The 1.1, it actually, TWSBI kind of killed the vibrancy of this ink. It's really a dusty, light red. It's almost to the point of a pink on the 1.1. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Not a lot of shading. There is some shading, just not a lot. The darks are way lighter than we saw on the other papers, and so the lights are incredibly light. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Again, that same light shading, but it's going from that really, really light to just a light red. So we are seeing shading, just nowhere near as nice. It doesn't look as good on this paper. 8 seconds to dry. Medium, it's a noticeably darker tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Killed the shade here, 14 seconds to dry. Scrubby for the extra fine shows us color variation. We got the color variation. The scrubby for the medium shows us none. We got none. Smear test, you could likely recover it. Let's look at some crappy paper. It didn't do too bad. Kinda good for moleskin. So I like to pull these out when they're doing pretty good, or sometimes if they're really not doing good. But here, look, it's pretty good. Yes, it's bleeding through in some spots. It's not touching the page underneath. For many people, and for a pocket notebook will run around, it's not making the underside of the page unusable. No real ghosting on that. Sure, the medium at the top spread. Yes, the medium at the top feathered. For a pocket notebook, walk around, not so bad. You could live with it. I don't know what happens if you do. We'll see that in a second. Whoa, you can see that going to ugliness right now. Sorry. The extra fine. Yes, it has some feathering all over it. Yes, it has some spread. It has no halo. It has no sheen. It has no shade. It only took 3 seconds to dry. If this was in your pen and this is your notebook, I think this will work. Is this what I would want to have as my go-to? No. But it'll work. You'd be able to read what's there and you're not destroying all of the pages. What happened with that 1.1? So the 1.1 started to come through little bits, but it's not killing the page underneath. It's not making the back of the page completely unusable. Scrubby shows us no color variation. We got no color variation. The smear test says you could likely recover it, and I want to believe it because this paper tends to be kind of a sponge. That's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Private Reserve's Fiesta Red, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now this is a very vibrant red, which makes me feel that I can go to a more muted kind of blue to go with it. And for that, I've chosen Birmingham Pen Company's the USS Requin Naval Blue, because it's a nice navy blue kind of color. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Private Reserve's Fiesta Red? Most of the problems that I have with it are my fault. I had higher expectations on the color based on its name. I expected a screaming red ink, and it was not. Now that aside, this red performs very well. It has very nice tones. It is a perfectly good and well-behaved red ink. Thanks for watching.